Good to be back here again. And I find it very interesting. Some people still sit in the same place, but some people don't. And it's okay. We are creatures of habit, but the preacher tends to take attendance by where people are sitting. And when you change where you're going to sit, then we can miss who's here and who's not here. But anyway, it'll be okay. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm glad that you called me to come. The night the trees wept. Some of you already recognize that we're looking at the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus suffered the second death for us. We look particularly not only at Jesus, but also at the disciples, because we have a back and forth between Jesus and the disciples. And don't think that the disciples were cocky. We can take this. They just didn't know their own heart. And that's a lesson for us. As we face the crisis of the end times, we may say, I'm ready for this. But I don't think we really know our own heart. And things are going to be tougher than what we can imagine. It was for the disciples. And so Jesus' predictions all came true. 11 disciples had pledged their faithfulness. Yes, we know that one had already opted out. That was Judas. But even Peter, even if everybody else leaves you, I will die with you. Until he ran. Yeah. Jesus assured them that they would all fall. The prophecy had said that he would be alone. So he knew it. Now, it's not that the prophecy forced them to fall. No, the prophecy foretold that that's what they were going to do. And they had the choice. And Jesus did everything he could to help them do different than what had been prophesied. Mostly will be in Matthew 26, although I reference several other verses as we go. Start in verse 36. Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, "Stay here while I go and pray over there." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Jesus has had a blessed time with the Last Supper. And on the way from the Last Supper to the garden, he has had that delightful discussion about the vine and the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. And we've even had that intercessory prayer of John 17. But now as he's nearing the garden, it's as if he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He groans under the weight of what he's carrying. His face begins to show a sadness, a sorrow, a pain that the disciples have never seen before. As he leaves the 8 disciples at the beginning of the garden and invites the other 3 to come with him, he's staggering so much that twice they had to come close to him and keep him from falling down. It was so tough what he was taking. With earnestness, Jesus entreated them, watch and pray. Lovingly, he warned them that if they didn't watch and pray, they would not be able to stand. Passionately, he begged them to prepare for the crisis that was coming. Zechariah 13, verse 7, speaks of strike the shepherd. And that's what's happening. Jesus is being struck, and there is no one to help him. He is going to go through this alone. The 3 were left within sight and sound of him. So he had moved a little way away from them. it's hard to know exactly how far, but close enough that they could see him, but far enough that they could go to sleep on him. They're listening and seeing him in this suffering time, and he has told them, it's important for you to pray. It's important for you to stay awake. They believed him, but Satan sent an oppressive sleepiness upon them. I believe if they had resisted, if they had said, this is important, I need to stay awake, they could have stayed awake. But when I'm tired, I sleep. You know? And it's usually pretty easy for me to go to sleep. It was more true 40 years ago than it is now, but head hits the pillow and I'm out. The disciples were used to coming to this garden and praying with Jesus, and they would pray for a time. But Jesus did not expect them to stay awake all night like he often did. And so it was kind of normal for them to, he's really going through it tonight, but sleepiness overtook them. Jesus was suffering the second death for us. The wrath of God was being poured out upon him. And now we need to think about, what is God's wrath? Is it uncontrollable anger? We've seen people with that kind of wrath. That's not God's wrath. God's wrath is a deep sense of sadness as he says, I'm going to let you have what you've chosen. And what you've chosen is the wages of sin is death. God is extremely sorrowful as he has to separate himself from those who have chosen the way of death. Why was this being poured upon Jesus? Because Jesus was taking the guilt of my sin, of your sin, the sins of the world upon himself. He became the representative human, and he took the wages of sin, which is death, upon himself, which meant that he was, for the first time in his life, he can't see, he can't feel, he can't sense the presence of his Father. The sustaining presence and guidance of God was, for the first time in his life, no longer present. Now, while we look at that, we should glance at the other side. Do you have a sense of the guiding presence of God in your life? We need to be close enough to him, spend enough time in his word, walk with him so that we have that sense that God is helping me step by step, moment by moment. God supplies us the words to speak. And occasionally, I have recognized that those weren't my words, those were his words that I said. It's really pretty exciting when that happens. In agony, Jesus is crying out, and the disciples, while they were still awake, thought of going to him and trying to comfort and help him. But he told them to stay here and watch, so no, they didn't go. Isaiah 52, verse 14 says that his face was marred more than any man. The agony of our sin weighing upon him changed the appearance of his face. And they knew that Jesus was suffering. But that heavy drowsiness had seized them. And I wonder how many times we have slept when we should have been praying. Something to think about. Staggering. Jesus felt a need for some human comfort, and so he left his place of seclusion and he came to where the disciples were, hoping to hear a word of affirmation, a word of encouragement, see that there's somebody who has heeded his warning and is praying with him. Disappointed, he found them sleeping. His voice aroused them when he came and spoke to them close. It aroused them. They were shocked at his appearance. His face was so haggard, so marred, so worn, so weary. Instead of criticizing them for their sleepiness, he sought to excuse it. He says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The spirit is willing. You want to, but you're not doing it. And how many times has that been true of us? When our intentions are good, but our follow-through is poor. Again, he says, pray. Let me keep up with these verses because I'm moving through there very quickly. 38, Jesus says to the disciples, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and pray with me. Went a little farther, fell on his face, prayed, saying, oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. He prays this prayer. It's 3 times he prays this prayer. 3 times he says, but Father, not my will, but yours be done. He says, God, I want to do what's going to be of the blessing for the universe, even though it's costing me everything. Then he came, verse 40, to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, what? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Can't you stay awake for an hour? And now time is elapsing. It is getting up to midnight. And they're sleepy and tired. But he said, please pray. It's important to pray. Then, verse 41, watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. He's not saying pray for me. He's saying pray for yourselves. Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. You need to pray, he says. You'd think they would listen, but they didn't. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, verse 42, a second time he went away and prayed again, saying, oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. Now, I read the chapter in Desire of Ages on Gethsemane, and I drew a little bit of insight from that. This second time, the weight of the sins, my sins, your sins, was so great that great drops of blood were squeezed from his pores. Now, some of you have high blood pressure, but I've never had that kind of high blood pressure. You know, that's pretty intense. Now, it's not completely unheard of. That is, it's a medical condition that has been observed. But what a scene when Jesus comes this second time to his disciples and they see his bloody face and they realize he's really been going through it. My sin made his blood boil. This was for me. He did this. He went through this for me, for you, for each of us. He goes to the 3, Peter, James, and John. And remember, Peter's the one who just an hour before has said, even if everybody is going to leave you, I'll stand by your side, even if it kills me. I'm ready to die with you. You're my Lord. You're my Messiah. You're my Master. Or James and John are here. James and John had just previously, within a week or two, they had with their mother come to Jesus and said, could we have the position on the right and the left when you come into your kingdom? Can we have that highest, glorious position? And Jesus has, of course, answered them, it's not for me to give. The Father has reserved it for those who really deserve it. But he says to them, can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Well, now he's drinking the cup. Can you take the baptism that I'm going to take? He's on his way to the cross. And these young men, yes, we can do it. How many times have we said we can do when we don't have any idea what we're volunteering for? when they see Jesus with his bloody face, he comes and awakens them, they would not have been so bold to say, we can handle whatever you're going to take. They would not have been so bold. And Peter, though he thought that he would be able to die with Jesus, it's not very many minutes before he's going to be running away. The sight of blood amazed them. They could tell that Jesus was really, really hurting. And again, he pleads with them, watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. You catch that. Second time, he went away and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father." And that's the time that he got a bloody face. He came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. He left them, he went away again, and he prayed the third time, saying the same words. Jesus, this third time, he committed himself to drink the cup of the wrath of God, poured out unmixed into the cup of his indignation. Jesus covenanted to pay the price for our sin. He would have died the second death there in the garden, except that an angel came and strengthened him. God sent the highest angel, the one that had taken Lucifer's place. I suspect it's Gabriel, but we're not given the name. God sent that angel to come and give Jesus a message of comfort. God himself needed to stay separated from this. Now, his heart was there with Jesus, but he could not give him that personal, physical attention that Jesus had come to trust in. But he sent the angel. When the angel came, it lighted up the place. Now, angels can come in the dark, but they didn't this time. And the disciples roused when they saw the angel, and the angel wiped the blood from Jesus' face. The angel strengthened him to go through with the mock trials and the cross. He was strengthened. The disciples went back to sleep. "Oh, he'll be all right." They went back to sleep. When he awakened the disciples the third time, they could see on his face the resolution, the commitment he was going to go through with this anticipated agony. And we should recognize that the 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus was in the heart of the earth, they begin here. It's here where Jesus covenants to go through the suffering. And so that's a significant time. But glancing ahead at just a few other things, when he awoke the disciples this time, he didn't say it's time for you to watch and pray. No, he says it's time for you to wake up. The betrayer is at hand. I should read that. Verse 45. Are you still sleeping, resting? Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. While he was still speaking, Judas came with a great multitude. And just a little glance at what happened here. The fireworks started with that angel wiping Jesus' face. But when the crowd came to Jesus and he says, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." He says, "I am he." And when he said, "I am he," the angel illumined him with the glory of God. And the whole mob fell as if dead. They fell down on their face, and it was as if they were worshiping. Now, it really wasn't worship, but it fell down as if dead. And then the angel let the light fade, and the disciples are looking on and saying, "What is this? I don't know what's going on." When the light faded, Jesus asks again, and he says, "I am he. Will you let these others go free?" And he submits to be bound. They start tying his hands. And policemen are not very gentle when they're arresting somebody. They have no reason to be gentle. Whether it's handcuffs or zip ties, they put them on tight enough that it's uncomfortable, even painful. They were not being gentle and kind to Jesus either. But then, of course, this is the time when Peter pulls out the sword and tries to cut off the head of the person who's closest to him. Turns out it's Malchus, high priest servant. And God deflects the blade so it doesn't take him in the neck. It just takes off an ear. And Jesus' hands are already tied, but he says, "Excuse me." And he reaches down, picks up the ear, and puts it back in place. You would think that the people seeing that would say, I don't want to have a part of this. But no. As soon as the ear is back on, they tie him back up again. And of course, the disciples realize if the glory could slay these people, we could get away. And Jesus is letting himself be tied. And so Peter says, I'm out of here. So he leaves. The question comes to us, because in these last days, we're going to go through a trying experience very similar to that of those disciples at that time. Things, yes, you can read what it says in Revelation. You can read what it says in Great Controversy. You can have your chart of last day events. But I can tell you now, things are not going to go exactly the way you expect. There will be changes that, it fulfills prophecy, but it's not what I expected. Well, that's where Peter was upset. This isn't what I expected. Well, things aren't going to be what you expect, but they're going to come. Are you spending the time with Jesus so you're ready for the crisis? It behooves us to meditate what our salvation cost and to recognize, why are we playing with these insignificant aspects of life here and now, rather than give it all to him? There's so many distractions, and we need to focus on him. We need to recognize his great love and care for us. If we recognize what our salvation costs as we meditate on Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, we will learn to abhor sin. We'll learn to recognize sin and shun it. We won't want anything to do with sin. God is in the business of giving us victory. He wants us to have complete victory over sin in the now. Let's sing a hymn in closing, number 100. Great is thy faithfulness, hymn number 100. We'll stand together as we sing.